JAMS is an orchestration solution that extends SQL Server Agent with centralized scheduling, monitoring, and dependency management across every server in your environment. Before we create the job, two things need to be true on the machine where the job will execute. First, the SQL Server Agent service must be running on the target SQL instance. You can verify this in Windows services, look for SQL Server Agent, and confirm the status is running. Second, JAMS requires the SQL Server client tools, specifically the client tools backwards compatibility and client tools SDK shared features. These must be installed on the JAMS client machine and on the machine where the job executes. JAMS supports SQL Server 2016, 2017, and 2019 shared features. The first thing we need is a credential. This tells JAMS which account to use when connecting to SQL Server and executing the job. Your credential can use a domain service account which works with Windows Integrated Security, or a SQL Server username and password for SQL authentication. Either way, this account needs permission to connect to the target database and run the SQL Agent job. Give the credential a name, enter the logon account, and set the password. Note that entering the password here does not change the account's password, it simply tells JAMS what the password is so it can authenticate on your behalf. Click OK. Next, we create a connection. The connection store is where JAMS holds reusable database connection definitions. You define the connection once and reference it in as many jobs as you need, which means if the server name or credentials ever change, you update one record, not every individual job. Give the connection a name and select SQL Server as the connection type. On the Properties tab, open the connection string builder, select the credential we just created for impersonation, choose your authentication method, then select the server name and database where the SQL Agent job lives. Use the Test Connection button to confirm everything is working before you save. On the Security tab, confirm that the appropriate user accounts have submit permission on this connection, then save and close. Now we create the JAMS job definition. This is where we tell JAMS which SQL Agent job to run, where it lives, and how to connect to it. Select the folder where this job should live, give it a name, and, critically, select SQL Agent as the execution method. JAMS ships with this execution method built in, so no additional configuration is required to access it. On the Source tab, select the SQL connection we created. JAMS will use this to query the SQL Server instance and populate the Jobs on Agent field with the available SQL Agent jobs. Select the job you want JAMS to manage. On the Properties tab, set the Execute as credential. This is the account JAMS uses to actually run the job. You can set this at the individual job level or inherit it from the parent folder if your organization uses a consistent service account across jobs. Configure any additional schedules, parameters, or notifications as needed, then click Save and Close. To run the job, right-click it in the Definitions view and select Submit. You will see an option called Evaluate Execution History. This tells JAMS to check the job's previous run status in SQL Server before starting, which is useful if you are resuming a job that failed partway through and want to pick up from where it left off. Once submitted, navigate to the Monitor view to watch the job execute in real time. JAMS shows you the current status, executing, successful, or error, alongside every other job running in your environment, on every server, in a single view. By default, completed entries stay in the monitor for 10 minutes before moving to the History view, where you can query past runs at any time. To review the output, right-click the job and select Show Detail, then open the Log File tab. This contains the job's output and any script-level errors JAMS captured. For the step-by-step execution history inside SQL Server Agent itself, individual step statuses and durations, right-click the job in SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, and select View History. JAMS surfaces the high-level outcome, SSMS gives you the granular step detail. Two errors come up most often when setting up SQL Agent jobs in JAMS. If you see unable to load the SQL libraries, you need to install the client tools backwards, compatibility, and SDK shared features on both the JAMS client machine and the execution machine. We covered this in the prerequisites. If you see SQL Server Agent is not running, open Windows Services on the target machine and start the SQL Server Agent service for that instance. That is the full setup, credential, connection, job definition, submission, and monitoring. Once this pattern is in place, you can apply it to as many SQL Agent jobs as your environment requires, and manage all of them from a single JAMS console. Links to the full documentation, including the connection store and scheduling reference, are in the description below. If you have questions, reach out to our support team at support.jamscheduler.com or call 1-800-261-JAMS.